Tea Time History Chat. So this year, they've only that long. This week, we're going into some of the anniversaries that have happened this week. I've got some interviews coming up, which I think you'll be interested in, and some videos. We'll talk about that and talk a little bit about book club. What else? I've got a book review pledge, and I'll also let you know what we're doing on History After Dark tonight. So, welcome. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a suitable beverage. I have my tea and my water because my tea generally goes cold over this time. I'll be spending about 3/4 an hour to an hour with you. So let's see how we go. And if you have any questions to do with the topics we're covering today, feel free to ask. If you've got questions about anything else, feel free to ask. I just might not answer them if it takes us on too much of a diversion. So there has been a few interesting anniversaries this week, so we will dive into those first. But I can see lots of you joining in the chat, and Caroline's got her cup of tea. I could see earlier Colleen is joining us. If you are on YouTube as well, say hi in the chat, and it also means I know that you can hear me because I've had sound issues before. If you're watching on YouTube, you can support me with super chats. Facebook, you must also. Welcome. Facebook doesn't always let me do the streaming thing, but it has today. So welcome if you are watching on Facebook, and of course on Instagram. If you want to buy me a badge, that will help. As you know, I am trying to replace my weird mic setup with a nice lapel Rode mic. That's what I'd like to do, and it will allow me to do some outdoor broadcasts as well. So I think we're about $60 on the way to that. So any help is gratefully received. Right, chewing gums. Afternoon everyone. Welcome. Who's saying welcome? And everyone on YouTube and Instagram. So right, let's get and also I must say welcome to anyone back to this on the podcast. Thank you, Mayfell Forest Witch. She likes my hair. I have made an effort. It has I can get a thumbs up on Facebook. I can see my thumbs up. Thank you, whoever's watching on Facebook. Yeah, I've managed to curl it. So there you go. I've made an effort for you. Colleen, thank you for my badge. Thank you so much. Colleen has bought me the first badge of the day. Very, very much appreciated. So like I say, we're going to look at some of the anniversaries of things that have happened this week, ones that I've got videos about, so that you can then, if you want, you've got somewhere else to go after this to have a look. I've got a really fantastic interview coming up for you this weekend. If you're a patron, you already have access to it. We'll talk about that with Joanne Paul. Those of you on YouTube can see very clearly my huge stack of books behind me. Those of you on Instagram will have to take my word for it that they're there. And but that behind me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 books is the shortlist for this year's book club, which is about to start. If you'd like to be in a historical book club, so it's not fiction, we're reading non-fiction. Maybe that'll change next year, but we're reading fiction this year. Non-fiction this year. And I have a short list of 11 books that I've put to the vote that everyone's going to vote on. We're also voting on the frequency. So how often do we want to meet? And we're going to have a live online, because people are all over the world in this book club, live online meetup, probably about every 8 weeks, 2 months. So there's a poll at the moment. All of this is happening in Patreon, which is patreon.com/British History, which you can join for £5 a month, or you can get 2 months free if you pay for it up front for a year. But in there, you'll be able to get to book club, but you also have a monthly exclusive blog. You have behind the scenes images and posts from from places I go to, which I don't share elsewhere, and you get I'll get onto this in a bit. You get historian interviews a week earlier than everybody else. You get the extended version because the historians answer the questions that you get to put to them. And that's all part of the Patreon version. And it's also ad-free, so no annoying adverts that come in the middle. So I'll get back to which one of to the one that's about to come out. But I made available early mid this week. No, where are we? We're only Wednesday. It must have been the weekend. That's right. The documentary video I've got about Katherine of Aragon. I called it Katherine of Aragon, the Banished Queen, the life and death of the extraordinary life and death of Henry VIII's first queen. So in the documentary, I have gone, so we're talking about Katherine of Aragon at the moment, BKM Musk. Talking about Katherine of Aragon. So it is the anniversary of her death this week. This is the link. 4th of January, 1536. And I've done a little documentary. It's about 25 minutes long. It's on YouTube. And like I say, it's called Katherine of Aragon, the Banished Queen, the life and death of the extraordinary life and death of Henry VIII's first queen. So I've gone through right from her beginnings, her childhood in Spain to her death and her funeral. Indeed, I've covered it all in that. So that's available on YouTube now, which of course, go and have a look at it after this. So it's the anniversary of her death now. So that also means we're coming up to the anniversary of her funeral, which, like I say, I've covered in that documentary as well. And for any of you who are Tudor fans, you may already know this, but on the day that Katherine of Aragon, which is it 20, it's a day different to my daughter's birthday. I think it's the 29th of January, but that's the same day that Anne Boleyn miscarries. So remember, it's 1536. 1536 is the year Anne Boleyn is executed. Anne Boleyn, at this point in 1536, has been on the previous year a fabulous long progress with Henry, some of which we are covering on the Private Life of Anne Boleyn tour in June and July, if you're interested in coming along on that. So she's had this happy time. So as we stand in 1536, Catherine has died. So any supposed threat that comes from Catherine to the legitimacy of Anne and Henry's marriage, they could assume, has now gone. She's pregnant. She fell pregnant on that progress. All should be well. And yet, on the 19th of May in the same year, Anne Boleyn loses her head at the Tower of London, executed by a French swordsman on the pretty much on the orders of her husband, Henry VIII. It's incredible, isn't it, to think how quickly Anne Boleyn's life unravelled. But we're talking about Catherine. So Catherine dies, and she has kept herself. She does at Kimbolton Castle. She has kept herself pretty much isolated. She withdraws to one room there. She wears a hair shirt. She fasts. None of this probably helped towards her health. Of course, she's about, I think she's 50 when she dies, so not old by our standards, of course, but also, you know, people died a little bit younger, but it was also perfectly possible to live a longer life in Tudor England as well. But she is extraordinarily ill and possibly dies of something like uterine cancer or something like that. But anyway, she's incredibly isolated. She's never allowed to see her daughter Mary after Catherine is banished from court, hence the banished queen part of the title of my YouTube video. And for a mother who was hands-on, for a mother who has only one child, that must have been incredibly heartbreaking. I don't even know how to put into words that. So if you're interested, that documentary is now available on YouTube. So about Katherine of Aragon, for anyone who's just joined us, because we have the anniversary of her death just a few days ago on the 7th of January. Actually, this is I'll go to this one next because this is still Anne Boleyn related, if you don't mind indulging me for a moment. 4th of January, 1698, that's when we lose Whitehall Palace. So for any of you who don't know, you'll have you probably, if you watch the Queen's State funeral, you would have seen Whitehall, the road and the area take part. It's part, the backdrop to a lot of the procession. It's where the cenotaph is, and it takes you from Parliament Square, so Westminster, basically up to Trafalgar Square. Trafalgar Square actually was where the mews of Whitehall Palace was situated. So where Henry VIII kept his birds, and I think the dogs might have been kept there. I might have that wrong, but the mews anyway. And so it was vast. Whitehall Palace was vast. And when the Stuarts became the ruling family, they moved into Whitehall, but they tried to renovate it. Anyway, so but unfortunately, just a careless act, sheets drying in front of a fire in January 1698 led to pretty much the complete destruction of the palace. So there are small bits of Whitehall Palace left. There's part of the cockpit, but that's within the government buildings now, unfortunately. So there's very, very little that you or I can see. The cockpit, though, interestingly, was where Queen Anne, who become Queen Anne Stuart, the final Stuart queen, where she lived for a time before she was queen, of course, before she was married, indeed. So there's very little, and because it was basically the victim of a catastrophic fire in 1698. So that also happened this week. The other anniversary that I was going to say a little bit about is the state funeral of Vice-Admiral Nelson. So Vice-Admiral Nelson, again, I've got a couple of videos about this. His fate, he was fatally wounded at the Battle of Trafalgar, which for English people is a very famous battle. Takes place in 1805. Now, it takes place in October 1805, and Nelson is shot. There's a sailor who is up on the rigging of the French ship Le Redoutable, and a shot goes through his shoulder, and I think it goes through his lungs and lodges in his back. I've done a video about this, so you can see if I've got it right. Well, I've got it right in the video. So it passes through him, and it doesn't kill him instantly. He's taken down under below deck. I'm trying to think of the right phrase then. Below deck, and he lives long enough to be told that they were victorious at Trafalgar. Now, this is important. This is in the Napoleonic Wars. The threat from France, expansionist France, is frightening and real. And Nelson and his victory at the Battle of Trafalgar was pivotal. So he lives long enough to learn that they've won, that the English have won the battle. But this is October. We're now in January, and I'm saying he's just had his funeral. So the 9th of January, 1806 is when Nelson is laid to rest. He's laid to rest at St. Paul's. He's in the sarcophagus that Henry VIII had earmarked for himself. Big black marble sarcophagus that Cardinal Wolsey had made for him. He'd commissioned it. It was made for Thomas Wolsey. It was confiscated from Thomas Wolsey by Henry VIII, alongside, by the way, all his property. And back to Whitehall Palace, York Place was confiscated as part of Wolsey's downfall, which of course was then rebuilt and expanded into Whitehall Palace. But down to Wolsey's sarcophagus, that was confiscated by Henry VIII. Like I say, it was earmarked for him. It was never used. And when Vice-Admiral Nelson, when they needed a coffin well, let's call it a sarcophagus. When they needed one, they decided to use that one. So he is not only in Henry VIII's sarcophagus, but he is in the crypt directly beneath the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral. Now, his body was brought back. So let's go back to the Battle of Trafalgar. He's aboard HMS Victory. He dies aboard HMS Victory, and the ship is badly damaged. So it is taken into port to be fixed and become seaworthy. So he obviously the ship, and he doesn't have I don't know actually about the traditions of sailors, whether a sailor who dies at sea is supposed to be buried at sea. But from what I understand, Nelson wanted a funeral, a land funeral. And he gets a full state funeral, which is pretty well, unheard of, basically, for someone who's not royalty. Yeah, that really is a fancy schmancy sarcophagus, to be frank. It's a very extra way to be buried, indeed. It's amazing. If you have a look on my Instagram afterwards, I've done a reel about Nelson's funeral, and in there you can very clearly see Henry VIII's, now Nelson's, of course, forevermore, sarcophagus. Yeah, there's actually other bits to the tomb that Henry VIII was going to have, which you can go and see. Remind me in a minute, I'll tell you more about that. So he was actually brought up the Thames, and he laid in state. He laid in state in the Painted Hall at Greenwich, which is the old Royal Naval College. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but the Painted Hall is magnificent. Turquoise sunset dream. Where's Henry VIII buried? Oh, I'll come back to that. Hi, Nikki, over there in the US, watching on YouTube. How are you? Remind me, Turquoise sunset dream, if I don't come back to that, because it's a bit of a topic that I keep coming back to anyway. There we go. So Doug says all others at Trafalgar, were buried at sea. Nelson was preserved. So Nelson's body comes back to the UK, comes back to Greenwich. He has been kept, I think he was embalmed, but he was basically, it was preserved in a cask of brandy. Am I right, Doug? Is it brandy? To get him back. He's laid in state at Greenwich, and then he has a river procession. So on the 8th of January 1806, there is a river procession from the Old Royal Naval College at Greenwich. So you're on the River Thames here, and in fact, you can pretty much do the same journey now if you take the Thames Clipper, get on a Greenwich Pier, and get off at probably Embankment, and he goes to Admiralty House, which is on Whitehall. This all ties in. Oh yeah, Doug says brandy is what it said, but anyway, some kind of very high alcohol content spirit. So, and he has one final night resting at Admiralty House. Now, Admiralty House is toward the top of Whitehall, so you're getting up to the Trafalgar Square end, and you go down the Strand. If you follow your nose down the Strand, you get to St. Paul's Cathedral, which is where he is buried. The funeral cortege was longer than the distance between Admiralty House and St. Paul's. So you kind of just grasp the scale. I think it's like 1.5 miles or something in between the two. And his funeral cortege is longer than that. His coffin is transported. Hi, Brian, how are you? His coffin is transported on a carriage which is made up to look like HMS Victory, where the ship on which he died. So it's incredibly elaborate. I suppose they had quite a lot of time to plan it as well, since he died at the end of October, and he isn't actually buried until the 9th of January. But it was significant. So I have a reel which shows you Henry VIII sarcophagus, where Nelson's sarcophagus is now, but the sarcophagus that he had that Henry VIII had earmarked for himself, and a little bit about the funeral. So there, that's on. So the one about the funeral, sorry, is on YouTube. The one about the sarcophagus is on Instagram. Now, I had a couple of questions, didn't I? Let me try and remind myself. So I'll come back to where I might have missed one. If I've missed one, tell me. But so where is Henry VIII buried now? So this is a bit of a topic that, if in fact, it's my oldest and longest. My oldest running and most popular video on YouTube. I look a bit different. I was very new to the whole YouTube thing. I did it as a live as well, and talking about where Henry VIII is buried and why he's there, why he's never moved. I know the other thing I was going to tell you is where the other bits of his tomb are that you can still see. Henry VIII is buried in St George's Chapel, Windsor, under the choir, alongside Jane Seymour. There, inside that vault, is also Charles I, the beheaded corpse of Charles I, and there are also, I think, a number of infants of Queen Anne. Chewing Gum says, I'm pretty sure Queen Anne, this is Queen Anne Stuart that we're talking about, was when she died, was as wide as she was tall. She was she was a large lady, to the point where it was health compromising. She was pregnant a lot, and she lost a lot of babies, Queen Anne. So, and I think two or three of them are in the vault along with Henry VIII. So Henry VIII is in St George's Chapel, Windsor. The slab that's put there to mark the kind of whereabouts of the vault is was put there by William IV, which makes me wonder what was there before. Maybe there was nothing that actually marked that there was such significant people buried in that vault. So the other bits of Henry's tomb that you can still see are at the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum. They're called the Wolsey Angels. So again, another bit that was actually commissioned and created for Wolsey, Cardinal Thomas Wolsey. And the four angels, there's, again, I have a video about the four angels, the Wolsey Angels, on YouTube, I think. Definitely on Instagram. And they were dispersed across the country, and some clever people managed to identify them, and over time all four have come back together, and they're on display at the V&A. Not the easiest to find, I have to say. So if you are going to the Victoria and Albert Museum, look up on their website before you go, or I suppose you can ask somebody when you were there, although I did ask somebody when I was there and they didn't know what I was talking about, but I did find them. They are there. So have a look on the Victoria and Albert Museum website before you go, just to see the location that they sit in the museum, so that you can go to them. But yes, so you can see the sarcophagus at the bottom of in the crypt of St Paul's Cathedral, now Nelson's tomb, and you can see the Wolsey Angels in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And you can go to where Henry VIII is buried if you go to St George's Chapel, Windsor. So there we go. Did I cover everyone's questions there? I hope I did. Let me know if there was any others. So, quick reminder, the Katherine of Aragon documentary, 25 minutes long on YouTube. Then I've got a couple of videos about Nelson's being fatally wounded at Trafalgar, and his state funeral. So they're all available to you after this. Also coming up this weekend. So I don't know if any of you have yet read, and I'm sorry for those of you in the US because I don't think you can yet, but The House of Dudley by Dr. Joanne Paul is a brilliant book. I think I've spoken about it a few times on this show before. She's looking at the the House of Dudley, the basically three generations, which mirror the three generations of the Tudors to whom they served, beginning with Edmund Dudley through to John Dudley, all John's sons, and of course ending with Robert Dudley and Ambrose Dudley. And you've got High Celia over there in Brazil. You've got Edmund Dudley, and he's the man who really actually builds up the royal purse, the royal coffers. He's the reason that when Henry VIII comes to the throne, he can be extravagant, he can be grand, he can put over this illusion really of majesty because he has the money to do it. He can go to war. This is on the back of the things that Edmund Dudley did. Now, Edmund Dudley was not a nice person at all. The way he goes about doing this is not something that I think any of us could get behind. Thank you, Motley Mayhem. He's going to follow me now. Thank you. So you've got the Dudleys rising to power at the time of Henry VII because they are pivotal in getting the royal purse swelled. And then when Henry VIII comes to the throne, not immediately afterwards, actually, but you have the execution of Edmund Dudley. Actually happens a little bit further on, and Joanne talks about this, of course, in her book and in the interview that will be going live on Sunday on YouTube for you all to see with her. So even if you haven't been able to read the book, The House of Dudley, you can watch the interview that I did with her on Sunday. If you're a patron, you can watch it now, and in fact you can watch the extended version, and it's got no adverts in it. So another reason to join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/British History. So you've got book club now and the early access to the interview, so you could see Joanne's interview right now if you want to join. And so Edmund is actually executed a few months into Henry VIII's reign, to the point where perhaps he wasn't actually thinking of execution, but Edmund is particularly unpopular. And if you watch the interview or read the book, you will understand why that is. And it's to do with the methods by which he's gained money for the crown. His son John is only small when Edmund is executed. And through various ways, the fortunes of John Dudley are of the Dudley family are brought back to them and secured for now. John Dudley, though, of course, you may also have heard of as the Duke of Northumberland, who was the father of Guildford Dudley, married to Lady Jane Grey. So this was the faction that wanted to put Lady Jane Grey on the throne, not Mary I. And we go into the book, of course, goes into this, but we go into it in quite a lot of detail in the interview as well. And Edward VI's device for the succession. If you've ever heard of or not heard of Edward's device for the succession, Edward VI personally pens his wish for, more than wish, he's dictating what should happen to do with this succession when he dies. It becomes increasingly obvious that he hasn't got long to live. Caroline says House of Dudley is probably March in the US. Okay, as well. Get it pre-ordered then. Looks like we will be covering it in book club as well. What I will do with any books that are not available worldwide is look when they are and order the books that we do in book club accordingly. So the House of Dudley, looks like we'll definitely be covering, but probably towards the autumn or the end of the year, just to make sure that everyone can has obviously got opportunity to read it. If you are a member of my Patreon and you're taking part in book club, or you would like to take part in book club, then I'm going live at 6:30 tonight, So in another 5 hours, I'll be going live to talk through the list of the 11 books that are shortlisted for book club this year. So if you want to actually participate in that, then live, then get into Patreon this afternoon, patreon.com/British history. Otherwise I'll probably share it with everybody after that, but that will help decide which book you want to vote on, because we're taking a vote in Patreon. So where did we get to? John Dudley. So John, and I asked Joanne, what was John Dudley's involvement in Edward VI's device for succession? So Edward VI's device for succession, like I say, is written in his own hand. But as it's becoming obvious that he is much closer to death than maybe he realized initially, or of course feared, then he makes changes, and they're again in his hand. The question is, how much of a metaphorical hand did John Dudley have in those alterations which Edward VI made? And so I asked Joanne that, and we talk about it. There's a story about John Dudley and his eldest son that I'd never heard of before. We're used to hearing about the Dudley brothers, especially if you've ever been to the Tower of London and seen the shield, which has the four brothers' emblems on it, and John Dudley's emblem in the middle. So we're used to hearing about Robert and Guildford and Ambrose, and who's the other one I've forgotten? Was that another John? We're used to hearing about this, but there was another one called Henry. Anyway, so Joanne goes into that story as well in the interview. But of course, we know Mary Tudor becomes queen. Lady Jane Grey remains in the Tower of London. Eventually, she's executed when there's further rebellions trying to put her on the throne. But her husband, Guildford Dudley, and her father-in-law, John Dudley, are executed for treason. So you have now 2 generations of Dudleys serving the Tudors, 2 generations losing their heads. And we talk about, again, how do the Dudleys recover again from this? This taint, of course, of treason. And you'll have to watch the interview to really enjoy this bit. If I tell you just briefly, Philip II of Spain. Philip of Spain, who becomes Philip II of Spain after he's married to further on down the line, after he marries Mary I, as we know her. He is pivotal in the recovery of the Dudley boys, the ones that are left, one of whom is Robert Dudley. So when Elizabeth I comes to the throne, she's already very close friends with Robert Dudley, and of course, so he rises back, as does the family. So it's an incredibly interesting interview. I was so excited about doing it because the book is brilliant. It's an hour and 20 minutes. So when you do set about watching it, I mean, I'm not offended if you want to. Oh, it'll be on the podcast as well. It will be on the podcast as well. So you can just pop in your earphones, carry on with the cleaning, cooking, or you can just sit and watch and enjoy as well if you want to watch it on YouTube. But it's about an hour and 20 long. Patrons, and you can see that from Sunday. Patrons, you can see it right now, and your version is 1 hour and 40 minutes long. So you can get even more cleaning or cooking or something, or resting done. So that would be quite I hope you really enjoy it, but let me know when you watch it. Pop in the comments what you think of the interview. Any stories in there that have surprised you, any new. I think it's a new way of looking at the Tudor dynasty, actually, because you're looking at the Tudor dynasty through the eyes of the Dudleys, and it's a different view of them again. So we've got this very people we think are familiar, the stories we think are familiar, and that here we go. There's more stories. There's a few elements that Ironbridge, welcome. I saw the word history on it. I went to Ironbridge the other week, and I put a reel out about it. I love Ironbridge. It's a Victorian village recreation. It's absolutely fabulous. It's proper going back in time. So where was I though? That took me somewhere else. So yeah, have a look at the video, the interview with Dr. Joanne Paul about the House of Dudley. Pop in the comments what you think of it. Obviously, if you're a patron, you can see that already. Everyone else, it'll be available on Sunday. If you sign up to my Substack, substack.com/Philippa B. But the link to that is in my link in on Instagram, and also on my website, britishhistorytours.com. Deb is a patron. Deb is a new patron. So big shout out to Deb for joining. I also wanted to say thank you to Gianna, who has been a kind supporter on Patreon. You can just be a kind supporter if you don't want to be a full member, but she's upped to a full member so that she can take part in book club. So I was very excited to see that. And Chrissy, who's increased her pledge just because she's a bloody lovely person. So thank you so much, Deb, Gianna, and Chrissy. Anyway, let me know what you think of that, because I'm very, very excited about it, as you can probably tell. So reminder as well that, Caroline asked me if I'm reading Spare. No, I think is the short and long answer of that. What I'm doing is just watching the debates afterwards. Brianna says she's really enjoyed Joe's interview. Fantastic. Brianna is also a patron. No, I haven't read Spare, but yes, I mean, you're getting quite a lot of the. It is actually out now, isn't it? I was going to say leaks, but it's not leaks anymore, is it? And then the counteracting kind of the story and what's actually true and what is clearly not. So yeah, but no, I have 11 books potentially. No, I've got 11 books in book club to put forward for. I think we'll probably get through 4 or 5. I'll have to look at the calendar. So if you're going to take part in book club, we're doing it every 2 months. It's every about 8 weeks, where we have a live, get together and talk about a book that we've read. So we're going to vote on that later. The voting for that, by the way, is open till the 29th of January. So if you want to join Patreon before that, you get your vote in for what we will be covering. Jenna is looking forward to book club. Yes, another excuse to add to the library. Yeah, you didn't need me for that though, did you really? I made a New Year's resolution to myself. I can't remember whether I talked about this last week, but to write a book review for every book that I read and publish it on my website, which is britishhistorytours.com, and it's /book-reviews, not hash dash. And the first review is available now if you want to read it. It's about Gareth Russell's book, Do Let's Have Another Drink. It's kind of a biography of the Queen Mother, and he tells it through these 101 anecdotes. Yeah, I did a bit of a review of it last week, didn't I? So the written review, just reminded myself, the written review is now available on my website if you want to read about that. Deb says the John of Gaunt interview, I'm presuming, with Helen Carr is fascinating. Well, the book by Helen, and I also have an interview with her available. Deb, if you look back through Patreon, you'll get the Patreon length interview with Helen, excuse me. You find the link to that. Everyone else, you can also look on YouTube for my interview with Helen Carr about John of Gaunt. Incredibly interesting. Really, really interesting. Really, really relevant as well if you want to learn, if you want to know more about how the Wars of the Roses started. And really the ripple effects of what was happening to and around John of Gaunt is Really interesting. Jenna is currently reading Do Let's Have Another Drink. It is a very good book, isn't it? And the anecdotes that he tells, because Gareth's, so they're all chronological. So you can pick up the book and read 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, or one, and leave it for a bit and come back to it. You know, you can pick it up and put it down. I mean, you'll just want to read it all. I'm pretty sure. The bits about Wallis Simpson and Edward the Eighth were quite interesting. Anyone who wants to read that book. In fact, I've just finished filming with Gareth. Gareth is he's the tour historian on my tours next year, and we've just finished filming a bit about the private life of Anne Boleyn. So I will get that out as soon as I can, so that you can, if you're interested in coming on a tour, you can get loads more information about the tour. Deb, I'm reading 4 different books at the same time. Yes, Lottie Rose. But the book club idea is so good. Thank you. I'm actually surprised I've not done it before. I feel like it's going to be so much fun that I can't believe I've not already done it. But anyway, there you go. We're doing it now. So, so for anyone who is interested in book club, get over to Patreon, patreon.com/British History. Get your vote in for how frequently we're going to do it, and get your votes in for the books. And if you get in today, you'll be able to join my live at 6:30, where we're going to go through each of the books, just to kind of give a bit of a better idea of the book, so that people can, a bit of a help for people to cast their vote. Just see a few of these. Lottie Rose, I'm sure Edward IV would not have said no to Wallis Simpson. Yeah. She might have been a bit thin for him. I don't know. Jenna, I'm just about to start reading the chapter about Wallis and Edward. Oh, well, enjoy. Melly, Gareth is on the Anne Boleyn tour. Yes, he is. So 3 tours going next year. The Anne Boleyn tour in May, which is fully booked. The Private Life of Anne Boleyn is it's the tail end of June into July. So it's the 29th of June into the 5th of July. And in September, we're doing the Elizabeth I and Mary Queen of Scots tour. So Gareth Russell is on all of those tours with us. And there's only 20 people on each tour. So you really do get full access to a historian the entire time. And everyone on the tour will want to talk about history. We'll want to talk about Anne Boleyn. We'll want to talk about the Tudors or Elizabeth or Mary Queen of Scots. And there'll be no eye rolling. Everyone's involved. Everyone loves it. No one will want to stop you and say, that's a bit boring. Talk about something else. We're in it. We're just, yeah. It's going to be brilliant. Deb should live in the UK. Well, yeah. Although at the moment it is raining. It is so grey. We're doing proper English weather at the moment, unfortunately. I'd prefer snow. I probably shouldn't say that. It'll snow now. I'd be like, I can't get out the house. Chewing Gum says, I'm amazed at the detail put into a lot of the official royal portraits. Prior to photography, they're stunning. The artists had serious talent. They did. A lot of the portraiture as well tends to have hidden meanings, doesn't it? Melissa, you will definitely find your people on tour. There's an incredibly high chance that you will meet lifelong friends on my tours, because that's what's happened. There's something I could never have planned for, and was a real pleasant isn't a strong enough word, surprise to me when I started running tours, how people made these friendships. And I have a lot of people who come back on tour with people that they made friends with previously on a previous tour. So yes, you will definitely be finding your people. Yes, you will. So just before I go, to let you know, I will be back here next week, Wednesday at 1:00 again. But also I'm back tonight. So obviously if you're in my Patreon, you will see me, you can see me at 6:30 tonight if you're around to talk about the books that we're going to vote. We're voting on for book club. But also tonight at 8:15, so 8:15 is History After Dark with myself, Catherine Brooks, who is the historical collaborator, and Dr. Katrina Marchant, who is reading the past on YouTube. We're all together tonight on Instagram and YouTube for History After Dark. It's History After Dark on both channels, history.after.dark on Instagram and just History After Dark on YouTube. We're together tonight. We're continuing the Year of the Deceased Gits. For any of you who've been following History After Dark for a long time, you'll know that we come up with, there's just these things that we laugh about and they come up again and again. And anyway, history is full of deceased gits. So 2023 is going to be the Year of the Deceased Gits. We started last week with Prince Albert, who I think wasn't as much of a git as I thought. I actually quite liked him. But tonight, if you want to join us, it is Robert the Bruce. We're talking Robert the Bruce tonight. He is our next topic of conversation. So that's 8:15 tonight on History After Dark on YouTube, history.after.dark on Instagram. If you're not around for my Patreon book club talk tonight or for History After Dark, then hopefully I will see you again here next week at 1 o'clock. Keep in touch. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on YouTube and Facebook, and sign up to my Substack so that you get the links to all the news and all the videos I've been talking about. You'll get that in a link on Sunday. Right then, everybody, have a fabulous day, and I hope to see you really soon. All right, bye-bye. Bye, everyone.